Welcome back, everyone. Now, with the elections less than 4 months away, many key races are starting to take shape. And many analysts predict that this is going to be a rough November for Democrats who could lose control of the Senate for the last part of Barack Obama's presidency. Well, joining me now to talk about this and more is Steven Shepard, Politico's campaigns and elections editor, talk about some of the most competitive races of this election season. Steven, thanks for a few minutes. Appreciate it.
Good to be with you.
Yeah, first off, we'll get into a few specific races, but if you were a betting man right now, are the odds that Democrats are probably going to lose control here, that there's too many toss-ups that have to break their way?
You know, control of the Senate is probably somewhat close to a 50-50 proposition right now. Democrats have 53 seats and an additional 2 independents who caucus with them. That gives them 55. In case of a 50-50 tie, the vice president would break the tie. So really, Republicans need to get from 45 seats to 51 seats in order to take control of the Senate. And a 6-seat gain historically would be pretty significant. It's not oftentimes you see swings that sharp, even in a midterm election against the president's party.
So now we get to some of the races on the ground right now. With every Senate seat being so important, we go to Montana, where you got a Democrat in there, Max Baucus, retired early, John Walsh, even though he was trailing certainly on the fundraising and some of the polling, certainly thought he had a good shot, but the latest news doesn't help him. And it's a familiar story we've heard over the years in other places, plagiarizing, but this one takes it almost to a whole new level, right?
That's absolutely right. You know, we've seen Joe Biden was accused of plagiarizing some of his speeches. Rand Paul, the senator from Kentucky, plagiarized some materials on his website. In this case, it was a thesis, or at least a paper he'd written for a master's program at the U.S. Army War College. He's the former head of the Montana National Guard and has a long military background, including in Iraq. He's been accused of plagiarizing a significant portion of that paper, and at the age of 46, this isn't a youthful indiscretion. He says that it was just a case of poor citations, but like you said, he was behind in the polls, behind in fundraising. A couple of Democratic polls had showed him creeping up a little bit, and now here comes this story, and it looks like Republicans in that battle for 6 Senate seats are going to start with 3 almost in the bag. Montana being one of them. The other 2 are South Dakota and West Virginia. These are red states where Democrats are going to have trouble winning.
I want to go to the House for a minute. And Stephen, in our district, with no really competitive Senate seats to speak of, there are going to be some really interesting House seats. And we always start on Long Island. Tim Bishop always seems to have a competitive race every 2 years. A different face this time than he's faced in the last couple races, but nonetheless, are Democrats, both with Susan Rice here being the new face, and she's got a fundraising advantage, and at least the polling I've seen, do they expect to keep those 2 seats in Democratic hands?
Well, look, the first district on eastern Long Island for Tim Bishop is going to be a tough race. It always is. He barely beat Randy Altshuler last cycle. He's got State Senator Lee Zeldin, about whom Republicans are pretty excited. He's raised a good bit of money. That's going to be a knockdown, drag-out race through the end of the cycle, and that's going to be a tough one for Democrats to keep. Even though the 4th district in Nassau County is an open seat, Democrats don't have an incumbent. Carolyn McCarthy is retiring. Yep. That one is a more Democratic district than Bishop's seat. And Kathleen Rice, like you mentioned, she raised over $1 million in the first quarter of this year. She raised almost $1 million in the second quarter. Republicans have nominated Bruce Blakeman, who was in D.C. last night for a big fundraiser. They hope that he can raise enough money to keep pace, but right now he's got about half what Kathleen Rice has in the bank, and she seems like a strong favorite, Nassau County District Attorney, to win that congressional seat.
You know, I'm hearing different things in the 11th District with Michael Grimm. One is he's got no money, he's got no staff here. The feds, in fact, told the Ethics Commission, stand down, we've got this in many ways. But yet, people say you don't know Staten Island until you've covered Staten Island. It's a unique animal here. Republicans want nothing to do with this guy. But is it conceivable Grimm could actually keep his job come November?
You know, it's difficult to say. He's obviously under that huge federal indictment. Democrats were excited about their candidate, Dominic Recchia, but Dominic Recchia is from Brooklyn. And right now, most people say, who've worked in Staten Island, that, like you said, you don't know Staten Island unless you've been there, and it can be tribal at times, and voters there may decide that, you know what, forget the Democrats and their Brooklyn candidate, and forget the U.S. attorney. This is our guy. We're going to stick with him.
Let's go up to the Hudson Valley and in the 18th and 19th districts. Interesting races. In fact, in the 18th, basically, it's the same story except it's like musical chairs. Hayworth was the incumbent when she lost to Maloney. Now it's the same thing. They've raised similar amounts of money. Historically, that's been as swing a district as we'll find in the state of New York. I know they've both been frequent guests in this program, but will this be one of those few races where, depending how the national kind of temperature goes, that might push this one way or the other?
I absolutely think so. You know, both have pretty high name ID. Nat Hayworth was the congresswoman from that district for one term. She was ousted in 2012 by Sean Patrick Maloney, and now he has pretty good name ID in that district. I think right now most observers have been more impressed with Maloney than they have with Hayworth's campaign.
Finally, in the 19th district, I mean, they're going to spend, Steve, they're going to spend more than $6 million on this race here, and I got to tell you, Eldridge, you might as well put him on the back of a milk carton. Nobody can tell what this guy looks like. He's doing no media. He's doing no press. He's got the carpetbagger thing that he could answer to, but at the same time, I know Democrats think this is a very winnable seat. To that end, what happens here? I mean, Eldridge himself's got a very interesting bio, but I don't know. What are you hearing about the 19th?
Well, look, both of them have similar amounts of money. They both have roughly around $2 million in the bank, but Sean Eldridge he's matching every donation he gets dollar for dollar, but he has the capacity to self-fund to basically an unlimited degree. Chris Gibson, the most moderate Republican in the House of Representatives, which fits the profile of this moderate swing district. He's a good politician, a good campaigner, and Sean Eldridge is going to have to be every bit as advertised, if not more so, in order to take him out.
It'll be very interesting to watch. Steven Shepard, thank you so much. I appreciate it for you. I'm sure we'll talk again before election night.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up next on RFL is a story that made huge headlines a few years ago, but now there are more questions than really some of the answers we assumed. Were 4 men from upstate New York, Newburgh, New York, set up by the Fed, by the FBI, for domestic terrorism? We're going to hear from the co-director of the new documentary on HBO, The Newburgh Sting. That's coming up after the break.